They said it was just a dress code violation, a rule like any other, but the truth unraveled in the silence that followed one girl's refusal to take off a simple pair of dog tags. Long before the school suspension, before the press conference, before the superintendent's SUV rolled onto the curb and the crowd started gathering outside Jefferson Middle, there was an old man in a VA hospital bed, barely breathing beneath a stiff white sheet. His name was Daniel Reef Daniels, a retired Marine Master Sergeant with a busted shoulder from Fallujah and eyes that hadn't blinked to a thread in 40 years. The nurse who checked on him twice a shift never asked about the frame above his bed, an untouched shadow box sealed in glass. She thought he was just another lonely vet with rusted medals and no one left to visit. On his final morning, she rolled her eyes when she saw Sierra's drawing taped to the window. "Yes, even heroes get fan clubs," she scoffed. But he didn't respond. He'd passed some time before sunrise, dog tags resting on his chest, Sierra's school picture tucked behind them, and his daughter listed as the emergency contact, even though he never pressed the call button. The staff opened the shadow box for the first time that afternoon. Inside were medals no one on staff had ever seen, some shaped like wings, others blackened by soot, and a letter signed in blue ink from a retired General Ellington, thanking Daniels for the lives saved in Operation Valley Gate, and for teaching men how to stand when no one else would. But it wasn't the letter that made them stop. It was the photograph, Daniel, standing straight in full uniform, arms around a 5-year-old girl in pigtails, dog tags looped around her neck. Sierra, the back read, "Never forget what they mean. If you agree that respect for service should be inherited, not erased, like and subscribe. Because when a child wears what her father earned, she's not breaking rules. She's upholding legacy." That's what Sierra Daniels tried to explain as she stood in the school hallway that Thursday morning, clutching the dog tags that hadn't left her neck since she was old enough to understand who her father was and why he walked with a limp. She was 12, small for her age, quiet in class but precise in every movement, like a soldier who hadn't seen a battlefield but had memorized every map. She didn't speak much, but when Principal Janet Moore told her the dog tags were inappropriate jewelry, Sierra said, without raising her voice, "They're not jewelry. They're history." Principal Moore didn't blink. "Remove them or go home suspended." The room went still. Sierra looked down at the tags, touched them once, and said, "Then I guess I'm going home." The hall monitor radioed the front office. By 9:16 a.m., the suspension paperwork was filed. But at 9:22, the superintendent's phone rang. Not from Sierra's mother. From someone else entirely. Mrs. Hill, the school secretary, had been working there since the year Daniel Daniels helped evacuate the district bus during the Great Flood of 2011, carrying 5 kids through waist-high water after the engine gave out. One of those kids had grown up to become a teacher. Another? The current district superintendent. So when she watched Sierra sit quietly outside the main office, suspended for dress code defiance, dog tags clutched like a prayer between her palms, Mrs. Hill made the call without hesitation. "You might want to come down here, Marcus. Someone forgot what this man did for this district." 6 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up the front drive. Inside the main office, Principal Moore was mid-email when the door opened sharply. She turned and smiled politely, unaware of what was about to unfold. Superintendent Ellington didn't smile back. He walked in with the quiet control of someone who'd commanded respect in both boardrooms and disaster zones. "Janet," he said, calm but firm, "let's step outside." She tried to explain, "It's about the policy, not the person," but Ellington didn't let her finish. "You suspended the daughter of a man who once stood in front of a burning school bus to pull out kids he'd never met, including my niece. And you did it on Veterans Week, for wearing his dog tags." Silence. Teachers in the hall stopped walking. Aides stepped aside. Principal Moore stiffened. "I wasn't aware of her background." Ellington's tone turned sharper. "You weren't supposed to be. You were supposed to lead with decency, not paperwork." At 9:34, she was escorted out of the building, quietly. Sierra remained seated on the bench, unaware of what had just happened behind the door. She looked up only when Ellington approached, crouched down, and said, "He would have been proud of you, you know." She blinked. "You knew my dad?" He smiled faintly. "Your dad taught me how to read a map, and how to walk straight in the dark." She didn't cry. She simply stood, straightened the chain around her neck, and said, "He always said not to flinch first." The hall remained silent as they walked past. Teachers nodded. One saluted quietly. And in the background, the shadow of a man long gone, but never forgotten, stood just a little taller. Sierra hadn't defied the rules. She had honored something bigger than policy, And for once, the world around her remembered how to salute back. The Monday after the incident, the school looked the same on the outside. Buses pulled in, morning bells rang, and kids spilled into the halls with backpacks too heavy for their backs and conversations too light to carry meaning. But inside, something had shifted. The story had spread faster than any email ever could, whispered from teacher lounges to lunchroom tables. The superintendent had personally walked Principal Moore out of the building after suspending a veteran's daughter for wearing his dog tags. But what most people didn't know, what even Sierra didn't know yet, was that Superintendent Marcus Ellington hadn't come that day out of politics or policy. He had come because of a memory. One seared so deep it still woke him up sometimes, soaked in sweat. It was a decade ago, the Great Flood of 2011, when a broken levee turned a district bus route into a river. He'd been a young science teacher then, stuck with 22 students and a driver pinned behind the wheel. Water rising, panic spreading, until a man appeared from the tree line like a ghost, mud-soaked, limping, with a rope in one hand and fury in the other. That man was Daniel Reef Daniels. He carried 5 kids on his back that day, tied a rope through the window frame, and refused to leave until every student was safe, including a trembling 13-year-old girl who would grow up to become a teacher herself. He never spoke of it afterward, never asked for praise. He just shook Ellington's hand and walked off before the reporters arrived. That was the man whose dog tag Sierra wore. And that's why, on Monday morning, Superintendent Ellington ordered a full school assembly, not out of punishment, but remembrance. At 10:05 a.m., the gym filled. Teachers lined the walls. Students slouched in bleachers, confused but curious. And in the front rows sat Sierra Daniels, clean shirt, straight back, and dog tags resting just over her heart. No one asked her to remove them this time. No one dared. The assistant principal introduced Ellington, but he didn't step up to a podium. He walked directly to the center of the gym floor and stood there in silence. "I'm not here to give a lecture," he said, voice calm but ringing across the space. "I'm here to tell you why a man's name matters." He gestured toward Sierra. Last Thursday, this student was suspended for wearing what some people saw as jewelry. But what I saw, what anyone who knows what sacrifice looks like saw, was something else. Legacy. The room quieted. Breaths held. Her father, he continued, saved lives in this very district. Not in war zones, but right here, on a flooded county road. And when the rules demanded those tags come off her neck, she stood up with more grace and courage than most of us ever have. Students turned toward Sierra. Some teachers wiped their eyes. And then the doors at the back of the gym opened. No announcement. No music. Just the steady steps of 5 uniformed Marines, walking in 2 lines, flanking a man in his late 40s, built like memory, broad-shouldered, spine straight, and silent. Daniel Reef Daniels. Alive. Very much alive. He'd been discharged from the VA 3 days prior and hadn't planned to return to campus. But when Ellington told him what happened, Daniel simply said, "She stood for me. I'll stand for her." The gym erupted, not in applause, but in silence, the kind that means something just walked into the room that deserves more than noise. He walked directly to Sierra, who stood frozen in place, dog tags trembling slightly against her chest. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he crouched, just enough to meet her eyes, and nodded. "You didn't flinch," he said quietly. She shook her head, barely whispering, "Like you taught me." Then standing, he turned to face the crowd. "I didn't ask her to wear those tags. I didn't need to. She knew what they meant without ever going to war. Because legacy isn't passed through battlefields. It's passed through behavior." His voice was deep but measured, and not once did it rise. "You want to honor veterans?" he asked the crowd. "Start by not asking their kids to take off what they bleed into." He walked away after that, no speech, no salute, just a quiet hand on Sierra's shoulder before disappearing through the gym doors as fast as he had arrived. That afternoon, the district implemented a new policy. Dog tags belonging to immediate family of veterans were officially permitted as symbols of heritage. But more than that, something less measurable changed. Kids who never noticed Sierra before now nodded when she passed. One kid asked if her dad was the one who carried his sister during the flood. Teachers who once ignored her quiet presence now paused, respectfully. And in the front office, where the receptionist once had to explain why those tags stayed on, a new framed photo was placed beside the school's mission statement. Daniel Daniels, arms around a 5-year-old Sierra, the words engraved below it. Honor has no dress code. It didn't end with applause, and that's what made it last. Because in towns like theirs, the loudest stories often fade fast, but the quiet ones, The ones that unfold in silences between people who've been through too much to need attention, those are the ones that stay. In the weeks that followed the gym assembly, Sierra Daniels didn't become popular, didn't start speaking more in class, and didn't remove the dog tags, not once. But what changed was the way the world moved around her. Teachers began looking up when she entered the room. Staff meetings now included 5 minutes every Monday where someone had to share a story about a veteran in their life. The Pledge of Allegiance was followed by a moment of silence, not just for soldiers overseas, but for the families who kept the flame alive back home. And every Friday, kids who had parents or grandparents who served were quietly invited to wear something, an old patch, a ribbon, even a photograph, and no one dared question it again. But the biggest change happened the day Sierra walked into the school library and noticed a new display. It wasn't large, just a single table against the window, covered in a black cloth with a small plaque reading, "In honor of quiet service." In the center sat an empty picture frame and a notepad beside it. A sign above read, "If someone in your family served, tell us who." No rank needed. Just a name. That pad filled by the end of the day. Students who barely spoke started writing. "Grandma served in Korea. My brother drives field convoys. My mom left her leg in Kandahar." And beside it, Sierra quietly placed a copy of the photo she kept in her backpack. Her and her father, side by side, one set of tags between them. No signature, no caption, just the image. That afternoon, the librarian printed it large and put it in the once-empty frame. The frame stayed there through Veterans Day, through Thanksgiving, and through December break. When the district launched its new education initiative in January, they called it Project Tagline. The pilot school? Jefferson Middle. Its motto? Honor has no dress code. Local news ran a segment. Then regional. Then national. It wasn't just about the suspension anymore. It was about a school that had learned how to listen. Sierra didn't care for the cameras. She always stepped out of frame. She said it wasn't about her, it was about doing what her dad taught her to do. Stand when it's hard, speak only when it matters, and never dishonor what someone else bled for. But the district insisted she be recognized, and so one morning in early spring, the school held a rededication ceremony, not flashy, no ribbon cutting, just a folded flag on a podium and one empty chair beside it. Superintendent Ellington spoke first, reading from a statement signed by state officials. "Courage," he said, "is not loud. Sometimes it's a 7th grader in a school hallway, refusing to undo the one thing that still connects her to the man who taught her how to walk upright." Then, without fanfare, he introduced the final speaker, Daniel Reef Daniels. He stood in his dress blues, the only man in the room not wearing a smile. His expression was steady, not cold, just filled with memory. "My daughter didn't wear these to get attention," he began, pulling the tags gently from his own neck, looping them through his hand. "She wore them because in our house, these mean you don't quit. You don't lie. And you don't stay silent when someone tells you that dignity has a dress code." He paused, scanning the faces, students, teachers, reporters, veterans, janitors, aides, every single one listening. "I've worn these in places where people didn't know my name but trusted me with their lives. And I passed them down not so she could be proud of me, but so she could be proud of herself." Then he turned, walked to the center table, and placed those very tags inside a glass case, sealing it shut. "I've got more," he said softly. "She can keep wearing hers. These stay here for the next kid who doesn't have the words yet." The room didn't applaud. It stood, quietly, together. Later that afternoon, Sierra and her father walked the perimeter of the school grounds without saying much. He asked if she wanted to talk about what happened. She said, "No. It's done." But before they left, she slipped something into the case beside the tags. A folded piece of notebook paper. On it, in her best handwriting, 5 words. "I didn't flinch. I remembered." And beneath that, smaller, "He taught me how." That night, as the sun dipped behind the brick walls of Jefferson Middle School, the halls inside held no echoes of shouting, no trace of suspension slips, no residue of shame. Only a soft glow from the library, where a single spotlight now shone on a display built not for trophies, but for truth. And if you looked close enough, through the glass, past the tags and folded notes, you'd see a reflection. Not just of Sierra or Daniel, but of every quiet legacy that refuses to die when remembered with love, dignity, and a child who knew exactly what she was carrying.